Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into today's story, do me a huge favor and smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you never miss out on these stories of justice and vindication. Today's story is a heavy one, about how the deepest betrayals can come from the people you trust the most. It's about a man who gave everything for 30 years, only to be thrown away like trash. But sometimes, the trash you throw out is actually a treasure you were too blind to see. Let's get into it. 30 years, David. 30 years I've wasted on this empty, boring life with you. The words, spoken by my wife, Eleanor, didn't just hang in the air of our meticulously kept living room. They drilled into me, each one a poisoned dart finding its mark in my soul. Her face, a mask of cold contempt, showed no flicker of the woman I had fallen in love with, the girl who once said my quiet presence was all the home she'd ever need. I look at my friends, she continued, her voice rising with a cruel crescendo. I see their lives, their travels, the things they have. And then I look at you, at this house, at this pathetic, stagnant pond we call a life. I regret it. I regret every single day I chose this instead of something more. She thought she was finally free, breaking the chains of a man she deemed an anchor. She had no idea she was about to be trapped in a prison of her own making, a prison built brick by brick with the very words she was using to destroy me. In that moment, as my world shattered, a cold, clear resolve formed in the ruins. I would leave, but I would not go quietly into the night. I would leave behind the truth, a legacy of our life that she had so conveniently edited. She wanted to see our life in a different light. Oh, I would give her a new light, a light so blinding it would burn away all her delusions and leave her with nothing but the scorched earth of her own greed. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. What was the point? Arguing with Eleanor was like reasoning with a storm. Her mind was made up, not just in that moment, but for years prior. I had seen the signs, the growing dissatisfaction, the way she'd look at me as if I were a piece of furniture that no longer matched the decor. So I just nodded, a slow, deliberate motion that seemed to infuriate her more than any shouting match would have. The color drained from my face, I'm sure, but inside, a strange calm had settled. The pain was immense, a physical weight in my chest, but beneath it was the sharp, clean edge of purpose. I went upstairs to our bedroom, the room where our daughter, Sarah, was conceived, where we'd whispered dreams to each other in the dark. The air was thick with the scent of Eleanor's expensive perfume, a scent that now smelled of betrayal. I pulled out a single suitcase, the one we used for our rare, modest vacations, the one she always complained were never exotic enough. I packed methodically, a few shirts, some trousers, my toiletries. I didn't take much. The material possessions in this house felt tainted, part of the lie she believed we were living. As I was zipping the bag, the door creaked open. It was Sarah, our 26-year-old daughter. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her face pale and stricken. She had heard everything. She had been standing in the hallway, a silent, complicit witness to her mother's execution of our marriage. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Don't go." I looked at my daughter, the girl I had taught to ride a bike and helped with her calculus homework. I saw so much of myself in her gentle nature, but I also saw the weakness her mother had cultivated, the fear of confrontation, the desperate need for approval. "Your mother wants a different life, Sarah," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "She's made that very clear." She wrung her hands, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. "But where will you go? What will you do? She's just upset. She doesn't mean it." I shook my head sadly. "She's never meant anything more in her life." I wanted to rage at her, to ask her why she never stood up for me, why she let her mother poison her mind with talk of status and wealth. But looking at her trembling form, I just felt a deep, profound pity. She was a victim, too, manipulated by a woman who valued appearances above all else. I pulled her into a hug, feeling her small frame shake with silent sobs. "I'll be okay, sweetheart," I murmured into her hair. "You just try to be strong." It was a hollow platitude. Strength was a currency her mother had devalued long ago. Before I left the room, I walked over to my side of the bed. From under it, I pulled out a simple, unassuming cardboard box sealed with packing tape. It wasn't large, but it felt incredibly heavy in my hands. It contained 30 years of my life, 30 years of truth. I placed it squarely in the middle of the large, king-sized bed on her side. It sat there, a stark, brown rectangle on the pristine white duvet she was so proud of, a silent testament waiting to be heard. I gave Sarah one last, sad look and walked out of the room, down the stairs, and out the front door, leaving the key on the hall table. The click of the door shutting behind me was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of an entire chapter of my life ending, but it was also the sound of a new one beginning, a chapter where the truth would finally have its say. I can picture it perfectly. For the first day, Eleanor would have been euphoric. The house, suddenly empty of my quiet, unassuming presence, would have felt like a palace to her. She would have walked from room to room, touching the expensive furniture she'd insisted on, breathing in the air of her newfound freedom. Her first call would have been her best friend, Brenda, another woman who measured life by the carrot and the price tag. "He's gone, Bryn. He actually left," she'd have squealed, a malicious smile spreading across her face. No fight, no drama. He just packed a bag and walked out like the pathetic little man he is. They would have laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. They'd celebrate my departure as a victory, the shedding of dead weight. She would have spent the next few days in a whirlwind of activity, a frantic attempt to fill the sudden void. She'd have lunch at fancy restaurants, maxing out the credit card I always paid off without comment. She'd have gone shopping, buying a ridiculously expensive dress for a future she was already painting in vivid, glamorous colors. She'd talk about finding a new man, a real man with ambition and a fat wallet, someone who could give her the life she deserved. Our daughter, Sarah, would have been a shadow in the background of this celebration. Her worried questions, "Have you heard from Dad? Do you know where he is?" would have been met with impatient dismissal. "For God's sake, Sarah, stop moping." Eleanor would snap, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your father is a grown man. He's probably staying at some cheap motel, feeling sorry for himself. This is for the best. You'll see. Our lives are just beginning." But as the days wore on, I know a subtle shift would have occurred. The initial euphoria would have faded, replaced by a quiet, gnawing unease. The house, once a symbol of her freedom, would start to feel too quiet. My empty chair at the dinner table, the space beside her in bed, the silence where my gentle snoring used to be, these absences would become a presence of their own. She would start to feel a prickle of something she hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. My quiet competence had been the invisible scaffolding that held up her entire world. I handled the bills, the investments, the car maintenance, the leaky faucets. She never had to worry about a single practical detail of our lives. Now, faced with a mountain of mail she didn't understand and a strange noise coming from the furnace, a sliver of panic would have begun to creep in. It would be about a week after I left, a full 7 days of her glorious, independent life. The thrill would be gone, replaced by a low-grade irritation and a burgeoning sense of being adrift. It would be then, as she was angrily changing the sheets on the bed, that she would finally deal with the box. She'd probably huff, annoyed that I'd left my junk for her to clean up. She'd grab it, intending to toss it in the garage, but its weight would surprise her. Curiosity, that insidious little worm, would begin to burrow. What could I possibly have that was so heavy? With an exasperated sigh, she would rip open the tape. Inside, she would find not junk, but a series of neatly stacked, sealed envelopes. Each one was numbered. On top of the first envelope lay a single, folded note. Her name, Eleanor, was written on it in my familiar, steady handwriting. Annoyance warring with a flicker of apprehension, she would sit on the edge of the bed, the box at her feet, and open the first note. "My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means a week has passed. I hope it was everything you dreamed it would be. I hope you felt the thrill of freedom you so desperately craved. I left this box for you not out of spite, but out of a need for the truth to be known. You accuse me of giving you an empty, boring life. You have no idea how full it truly was. You have no idea the things that filled it, the sacrifices that were made to keep it from collapsing. In these letters, I'm going to tell you the story of our 30 years together. Not the edited version you've constructed in your mind, but the real one. The one I lived every single day. I ask only that you read them in order. Each one is a piece of the puzzle you never knew you were a part of. When you are finished, you will see our life, and me, in a completely different light. I promise you that. Yours for the last time, David. Her first reaction, I'm sure, would be a scoff. How dramatic. How pathetic. Still, she would be intrigued. What secrets could a man as boring as me possibly have? She'd tear open the envelope marked 1. Letter number 1. The girl with the wildflowers. My Eleanor, do you remember the day we met? It was at a small local festival in that little park by the river. I was 22, painfully shy, and utterly convinced I would die alone. You were 20, and you were the most vibrant thing I had ever seen. You weren't wearing anything fancy, just a simple sundress, and you had a crown of wildflowers in your hair that you'd made yourself. Your laugh, it was the most honest sound in the world. We talked for hours, sitting on a checkered blanket, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. You didn't ask me what I did for a living, what kind of car I drove, or how big my ambitions were. You asked me what books I read. You asked me what made me sad. You told me you dreamed of having a small house with a big garden, a couple of kids, and a man who would read to you at night. You said you didn't need a palace. You just needed a home. You looked at me with those bright, beautiful eyes and said my quiet presence felt like peace. We fell in love that summer. A simple, profound love built on shared dreams and long walks. Do you remember our first apartment? It was tiny, with peeling paint and a temperamental radiator. We didn't have any furniture, just a mattress on the floor and a couple of milk crates for a table. But we were happy. We would lie awake at night, my arm around you, and you'd trace patterns on my chest, telling me that as long as we had each other, we were the richest people in the world. We'd cook spaghetti and dance in the kitchen to an old radio. That was the girl I married, Eleanor. A girl whose wealth was measured in laughter and whose currency was love. I look at you now, or rather, the woman you were a week ago, and I don't see a trace of her. That girl has been buried, suffocated under a mountain of things you convinced yourself you needed. The designer bags, the expensive dinners, the constant, desperate need to keep up with friends who define their worth by their possessions. You traded the girl with the wildflowers for a woman who would sneer at a cheap bottle of wine and a checkered blanket. You wanted more, but you don't even remember that you once had everything. In my next letter, I'm going to tell you about the first major sacrifice I made for you. The first brick in the foundation of the boring life you came to despise. Maybe it will jog your memory. I imagine her finishing that letter with a frown. A flicker of an old memory, quickly suppressed. Nostalgia was a weakness. She'd be annoyed at my attempt to guilt-trip her with the past. Pathetic, she'd mutter to herself, but she wouldn't be able to stop herself. She would tear open the second envelope. Letter number 2, The Fork in the Road. My Eleanor, about a year into our marriage, I was presented with the single greatest opportunity of my professional life. I was working as a junior engineer at a small tech firm, but on the side, I had been developing something. It was a new type of data compression algorithm. It was groundbreaking, and I knew it. My best friend at the time, Mark, who was far more business savvy than I, had secured a meeting with a venture capital firm. They were interested. Not just interested, they were ready to fund us, to help us start our own company. Mark and I stayed up for nights on end, drafting business plans, dreaming of the future. It was a huge risk, of course. It would mean quitting my stable job, pouring every penny we had, and working 100-hour weeks for years with no guarantee of success. But the potential reward was astronomical. We could have been millionaires before we were 30. I came home that night, buzzing with excitement, ready to share the news with you, my partner, my biggest supporter. I found you in the kitchen, crying. You weren't crying loudly. It was a quiet, desperate kind of weeping. When I asked what was wrong, you threw a magazine on the table. It was open to a page advertising pristine suburban homes. You told me you couldn't stand our tiny apartment anymore. You talked about your friend Susan, who had just gotten married and moved into a lovely 2-bedroom house with a yard. You said you felt ashamed, that you felt like we were failing. You weren't the vibrant girl with wildflowers anymore. You were a woman terrified of falling behind in a race you had only just entered. You wanted security. You wanted a guarantee. You wanted a house with a picket fence, and you wanted it now. I looked at your tear-streaked face. I looked at the business plan in my briefcase. I saw two futures branching off in front of me. One was a path of high risk and high reward, a thrilling, terrifying climb with you by my side. The other was a path of stability, security, and predictability. In that moment, watching you cry over a picture in a magazine, I made my choice. I chose you. I chose your peace of mind over my ambition. The next day, I called Mark and told him I was out. He was devastated. He called me a fool, a coward. He told me I was sacrificing a billion-dollar idea for a picket fence. He was probably right. He went on to find another partner and, a few years later, sold their company for a fortune. I never told you the full extent of what I gave up. When I came home and told you I'd gotten a promotion and a raise in my boring, stable engineering job, you were overjoyed. 2 months later, we put a down payment on our first house. The one you now call a stagnant pond, that house, Eleanor, was built on the grave of my biggest dream. I buried it willingly because I thought your happiness was worth more than any fortune. For a long time, I believed I was right. I built you a world without risk, a world of absolute security, because that's what you told me you needed. It is the cruelest irony that you came to hate me for giving you exactly what you begged me for. I could see her face now, reading that. Pale, with confusion. She would have no memory of that night, not the specifics. She would only remember wanting the house. The idea that I had been on the cusp of something huge would seem preposterous to her. Me, the quiet, unassuming man she married? It didn't fit her narrative. She would be shaken, but her arrogance would reassert itself. She'd tell herself I was exaggerating, making it up to make her feel guilty. But a seed of doubt would have been planted. A tiny, hairline crack in the foundation of her self-righteousness. Her hands, perhaps trembling slightly now, would reach for the third envelope. Letter number 3, our daughter, Eleanor, the greatest joy of my life, arrived on a rainy Tuesday in April. Sarah, the moment I held her, I knew I would do anything to protect her, to give her the best life possible. In her, I saw a chance to recapture the magic we had lost. I saw the girl with the wildflowers in her eyes. For the first few years, we were a team. We were parents. We were united in our love for this tiny, perfect human being. But as she grew, I saw a change in you. Your anxieties about money and status, which had been dormant, came roaring back to life. But this time, they were projected onto our daughter. It started subtly. You'd make comments about the other mothers at her preschool, the cars they drove, the vacations they took. You insisted on enrolling her in the most expensive ballet classes, not because she loved to dance, but because the right children were in them. When she was in high school, it got worse. I would come home from work, and I'd hear you talking to her in the kitchen. I wasn't eavesdropping. You just spoke as if I weren't even there. Don't settle, Sarah, you'd say, your voice sharp. Look at your father. A good man, yes, but he has no ambition. You need to marry someone who can give you the world, not just a house in the suburbs. You taught her that love was transactional. You taught her that a man's worth was measured by his bank account. You would praise her when she dated the captain of the football team from a wealthy family and criticize her when she had a crush on the quiet, artistic boy who worked at the bookstore. I tried to counteract it. I spent hours with her, teaching her about integrity, kindness, and the value of a quiet life. I tried to show her that my love for her, and for you, was not based on what we had, but who we were. But I was one voice against a daily chorus of your materialism. You were her mother. Your influence was stronger. The day she came to me, crying, because she had broken up with a boy she genuinely liked, because you told her he had no prospects, a piece of my heart broke. I saw you had created a weaker version of yourself, a girl filled with your anxieties, but lacking your iron will. You made her feel guilty for loving her father, for enjoying the simple life I provided. You positioned me as a cautionary tale. Don't end up like your father was the unspoken lesson in everything you taught her. And when you delivered your final, cruel speech to me a week ago, Sarah stood in the hallway and said nothing. She cried, yes, but she did not defend me, because you had successfully taught her that my love, my stability, my 30 years of devotion were worthless. You took our beautiful daughter and you poisoned her against the very idea of unconditional love. You did it to validate your own unhappiness. That, Eleanor, is a sin I find much harder to forgive than your betrayal of me. This letter would hit her hard. Accusing her of corrupting our daughter would pierce through her armor in a way my own pain couldn't. She would be furious, defensive. I gave her the best of everything, she would scream to the empty room. I just wanted her to have a better life than this. But the truth would sting. She would see the flicker of Sarah's unhappiness, her constant anxiety, and for a moment, she might see her own role in creating it. The cracks in her worldview were widening. The box on the floor was no longer just a box. It was a Pandora's box, and she was compelled to see what other horrors, what other truths it contained. She would reach for the fourth letter, her anger a shield against the creeping dread. Letter number 4. The price of your comfort. Eleanor, your primary complaint for the last decade has been about our modest life. You've bemoaned my boring job, my refusal to take financial risks, my meticulous, almost fanatical saving habits. You saw it as a lack of ambition, a sign of my weakness. You saw my spreadsheets and budget plans as a prison. You have no idea they were actually the walls of a fortress built to protect you. You thought I was a miser, pinching pennies out of fear. You mistook caution for cowardice. Let me tell you about the things you never saw. Every month, for 30 years, a portion of my salary went directly into a series of carefully managed investment accounts. While you were buying another pair of shoes you didn't need, I was buying shares in burgeoning tech companies. While you were complaining about our 10-year-old car, I was investing in real estate on the other side of the country. I did this in secret, not to hide wealth from you, but because I knew you. If you had known about the money, you wouldn't have seen it as a nest egg for our future, for our retirement. You would have seen it as a fund for a new kitchen, a luxury cruise, a bigger diamond. You would have spent it, all of it, in your endless, desperate quest to fill the void inside you with material things. My frugality wasn't about depriving you. It was about protecting our future from your impulsiveness. I created a separate financial life, a secret garden of wealth that grew silently while you were busy complaining about the size of our front yard. You saw a man content with a simple life. The world saw something different. That boring engineering job, I rose to the level of senior project manager, overseeing massive infrastructure projects. I was respected, valued. I was offered partnerships, promotions that would have required us to move, to change our lives. I turned them all down. Why? Because you had made it clear you never wanted to leave this town, this house, this circle of friends you were so desperate to impress. I tether my career to this town for you. I deliberately capped my own potential to maintain the life you claimed to hate, but were terrified to leave. So yes, I was cautious. I was methodical. I was boring because I had to be. I was the captain of ship with a saboteur on board, a saboteur who kept trying to drill holes in the hull while complaining that the ship wasn't a yacht. My entire financial life was a carefully constructed dam, holding back a flood you didn't even know existed. And in my final letter, Eleanor, I'm going to tell you exactly what that flood was. I'm going to tell you the one secret I have kept from you for 20 years. The secret that defined our marriage, our finances, and the boring life you so despise. Prepare yourself. The truth is rarely as comfortable as the lies we tell ourselves. By now, she would be in a state of shock. The idea of me, her boring, predictable David, having a secret, successful financial life would be utterly disorienting. It would shatter her perception of me as a weak, unambitious provider. It would mean that her narrative, the one where she was the victim of my mediocrity, was a complete fabrication. The dread would be a cold knot in her stomach. The final envelope would feel as heavy as a tombstone in her hand. With trembling fingers, she would open it. Letter number 5, the truth. My dearest Eleanor, 20 years ago, we almost lost everything. And it was entirely your fault. Do you remember that year? Sarah was 6, You had just redecorated the living room for the third time, and you were spending more and more time with your new, wealthy friend, Caroline. You started dressing differently, talking differently. You were desperate to fit in. To fund this new lifestyle, you did something you thought I would never discover. You took out a credit card in your maiden name, then another, and another. You ran up a staggering amount of debt. But that wasn't the worst of it. You took financial advice from Caroline's husband, a slick, fast-talking investor. He convinced you to invest a significant sum of money you borrowed against the house without my knowledge, by forging my signature on a home equity line of credit application. The investment, of course, was a scam, a Ponzi scheme. It collapsed, and all the money was gone. One day, a letter arrived. It was not a bill, but a final notice of foreclosure. We were 3 months away from the bank seizing our house. We were over $200,000 in debt, a sum that in those days was insurmountable for a family like ours. I found a box of credit card statements you had hidden in the attic. I saw the loan documents. I saw the entirety of your betrayal and your catastrophic foolishness laid out in black and white. I had every right to be furious. I had every right to confront you, to divorce you, to expose you for what you had done. It would have ruined you. We would have lost the house, declared bankruptcy. You would have been humiliated, and Sarah's life would have been thrown into chaos. I looked at you, sleeping peacefully in our bed, oblivious to the sword hanging over our family. And I looked at Sarah's school picture on a nightstand, and I made another choice. I didn't confront you. I protected you, not just from the consequences, but from the knowledge of your own failure. I took on a second job. For 20 years, Eleanor, while you slept, I worked. 4 nights a week, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., I worked as a night shift supervisor at a logistics warehouse across town. I would come home, shower, change, have breakfast with you and Sarah, and then go to my boring day job. I slept maybe 4 hours a night. I did this for 2 decades. The boring life, the lack of vacations, the old car. It was all a lie, a carefully maintained stage play to funnel every spare dollar I had into paying off the secret, crushing debt you had created. The money I made from my secret investments, it didn't go to a new car. It went to paying off the loan sharks you had inadvertently gotten involved with through your investor. I paid it all off, every single penny. It took me 18 years. The last 2 years, I kept working the second job, but that money, along with my other investments, went into a separate account. A trust. My trust. That is where my wealth is, Eleanor. The wealth I've built in the shadows while you criticized me in the light. Yes, I am a wealthy man. Far wealthier than you could ever imagine. But you will never see a dime of it. Under the terms of our prenuptial agreement, which you insisted on because you thought your family had more money than mine, all assets held individually remain individual property upon divorce. You thought it would protect you from me. Another irony. So here's the truth you wanted. The life you hated wasn't my failure. It was my greatest triumph. It was the masterpiece of my love for you. A life I painstakingly built to save you from yourself. I sacrificed my dreams, my health, my time, my entire being to give you the gift of blissful ignorance. I let you think I was small so you would never have to know how small you had been. You regret our 30 years together? I regret nothing. I kept my vows. I protected my family. I did my duty. Now, you have what you wanted. You are free of me, but you are not free of the truth. It will be your companion now, in this big, empty house that I saved for you. The house is paid off. That is my final gift. But all other assets, the fortune I built in the dark, are mine. You want a richer life. I have gone a live one. I hope you find what you are looking for. I doubt you will. David. The silence in the room would be absolute. The letter would fall from her nerveless fingers. Her face, a mask of disbelief, slowly crumbling into horror. Every complaint she ever made, every insult she ever hurled, every moment of contempt she ever showed him would flash through her mind, recontextualized into an act of monstrous, ignorant cruelty. The boredom, the stability, the frugality, it was all a cage she had built for him, not the other way around. He hadn't been an anchor. He had been a goddamn life raft, and she had just set it on fire. The color would drain from her face as the final, devastating truth landed. He was rich. Secretly, unimaginably rich. And it was all his. Her dreams of a glamorous new life, funded by a generous divorce settlement from her boring husband, evaporated in an instant. She wasn't free. She was marooned, left with nothing but a paid-for house and the crushing, unbearable weight of the truth. Her face would crumple, and for the first time in 30 years, Eleanor would weep not out of dissatisfaction, but out of a loss so profound she was only just beginning to understand it. As for me, I am writing this from a small cafe overlooking the ocean. The air is warm, and the coffee is good. I bought a small, comfortable house a few towns over. It has a big garden, just like the one she said she wanted all those years ago. I'm planting wildflowers. Sarah has called me a few times. She's distraught. Her mother showed her the letters. She apologized over and over for her blindness, for her weakness. I told her I forgive her. She's a product of her environment, and I hope, in time, she can learn to be her own person. I have not heard from Eleanor, and I don't expect to. What could she possibly say? I didn't do this out of pure revenge. I did it because the truth deserved to be honored. My love, my sacrifice, it deserved to be seen, even if it was only in the rearview mirror. You see, some people are so busy looking for fool's gold that they throw away a diamond, never realizing its worth until it's gone forever. She wanted a different life, and in the end, I gave it to her, just not the one she expected. And that's the story. It's a powerful reminder that the quietest people often have the loudest stories, and that we should never, ever underestimate the value of a good and loyal heart. What do you guys think? Was he justified in what he did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have a story of your own where you finally got the last word, I'd love to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, stay strong and never let anyone devalue your worth.